What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Now, I just watched HBO boxing. They covered it. SkySports also covered it. Luis King Kong Ortiz versus Malik Scott. And on my post fights, as you guys know, make sure you guys subscribe and like the video. I give you guys the good and the bad and the ugly. Now, the good is Luis King Kong Ortiz. He stayed undefeated. He has a new deal with Matchroom Boxing, and he just won via unanimous decision, which a lot of people did not expect to see a guy like Malik Scott go the distance. And let's get right into my prediction. First of all, the bad is it wasn't a good fight in terms of an action-packed, fun-filled fight. It was very lackluster, and I'm going to break down why I think that is the case. From my stance, I think Ortiz, he looked at, you look at some guys like BoxRec and stuff, you look at Tony Thompson, he knocked down Malik Scott. Deontay Wilder knocked him out in the first round off of, some people even thought he took a dive off of it. It looked like a temple shot and then a jab. And Derek Chisora also knocked out Malik Scott. So I think Luis Ortiz, he went in there with like a lazy approach, thinking that, I'm King Kong. This is easy work. This is a guy who can't take a shot. And I don't think, especially in those early rounds, he did make some adjustments, which is good for him. But those early rounds, that coupled with the fact that he was on an 8-month layoff, not to make any excuses, but you got to factor things in. He hadn't fought since Tony Thompson. He was with Golden Boy, then he switched over, now he's with Matchroom. First fight, 8 months. He seemed like his timing was a bit off in those early rounds. Plus, he probably thought like, I'm King Kong. This is easy work. So he went in there with a lazy approach from what I seen. And I do a lot of round by round tweeting during the fights a lot of times, and one of the things that I said was Ortiz needs to jab, double jab, especially in those early rounds. And coincidentally, in between the rounds, his corner said the same thing. I think if he would have did that and put punches together, combinations better, then it might have been a different outcome. He might have been able to keep his knockout streak going, because this is boxing. At the end of the day, nobody's going to give you shit. You know what I mean? Yes, it doesn't really do much for Malik Scott's stock, but he at least played spoiler and went the decision and fucked up your knockout, like your threatening knockout image. You know what I'm saying? So it didn't make, he didn't really fight the right type of fight either. And that's also the bad. So for me, I thought you can't blame Luis Ortiz solely. I thought the game plan of Malik Scott, it was very reminiscent to like a Lamont Peterson. I think Peterson pulled it off better. Plus, he pulled the trigger in the second half of the fight, and I'm talking about Peterson versus Danny Garcia. He pulled the trigger better, and he started to, at some point, let off his offense, and he was landing some nasty counters and good shots on Danny Garcia, and it looked like he was about to stop Danny Garcia late in the fight. But we never really seen that from Malik Scott. I think it was just the way a lot of people talk about this running stuff. What Scott was doing in the first rounds, that is what the fans say running. That was running, because there's no way you're going to win a fight. Now, for Scott's case, it makes sense for him to be doing that. You're in there with the fear puncher. You're not going to give him anything. And again, like I said, this is boxing. No one's going to give you no easy looks. If they can make you look like shit, then they're going to do it and go the distance and collect the paycheck. They're going to do it. So Ortiz needs to adjust for that fact and be aware of that. And you got to put it together. You got to give credit to guys like Gennady Golovkin, another experienced amateur, and he finds a way. People don't want to engage with him either, but he finds a way to put together so many punches and an immense amount of pressure where you have to get hit with something unless you have a great defense. Now, granted, Triple G hasn't been in there with the biggest names and guys who are fighting quite like Malik Scott was fighting, but still, you got to give him props for that. You got to put it together, and I think in those early rounds, Ortiz wasn't really doing that. It looked like he was looking for home run shots, head hunting, wasn't going to the body, things like that. The good for Luis Ortiz is I think he did make some adjustments later in the fight. He dropped, I don't even remember, because that's part of the ugly is I didn't like the referee job. I thought he was focused on stupid issues, like he was like, oh, get the punches up, but there was like 4 to 6 slips / knockdowns. Some of them looked like they could have been knockdowns, like punches landed, and he ruled them all slips. So I don't even really remember off the top of my head how many actual knockdowns there were. There were like 2 or 3, and one of them was a really nice, nasty hook to the body, I think it was, and that was a paralyzing shot. So good for Ortiz. He did make some adjustments. I think he should have did that earlier. Stop head hunting and just realize what you're in there with, and you have to put it together. But overall, I think a lot has to do with Malik Scott, how he chose to fight. He was fighting in a way that was like pure survival mode. When people talk about, oh, Guillermo Rigondeaux, Terrence Crawford versus Postal, Floyd Mayweather, they ran, Edeslani Lara, these guys aren't doing that. Like, you know what I'm saying? They're still hitting you with precision, nasty counters. Like, you look at Edeslani Lara versus Canelo. He was rocking Canelo's head back, and he had sweat flying shots, even if he is being defensive, right? Same thing with Mayweather. He's bow straight down the pipe, hitting you with nasty rights, things like that. Rigondeaux, sharpshooter, sniper, right? That's what Scott was failing to do. I thought his footwork looked a bit clunky, like he was moving alongside. That's why I expected Ortiz to look a little bit better, because I don't think even how Scott was moving, it looked like his legs were getting tripped up and stuff like that. It didn't look like he was moving like a Rigondeaux or Lomachenko with the footwork, and Ortiz was not throwing enough punches and a consistent enough jab to disrupt that. So Scott, I don't know. I mean, it looked like he was in there to survive. It wasn't you would never want to see a rematch or anything of this particular fight, and I don't think there was no way he was going to win. I had Ortiz, even though it wasn't his most impressive, sharpest performance, I had him winning every single round. Plus, there were multiple knockdowns, some that didn't even get called knockdowns. So just an ugly fight. Ortiz, he would have had to like search and put something together. I think Ortiz should have fought like he fought Brian Jennings. I think he maybe respected Brian Jennings, a guy who went the distance with Klitschko, more than Malik Scott. He probably thought Scott was going to be easy work, and then he's seen how fidgety and veteran experience. That's the thing with the veteran. A lot of times they know how to survive, and you got to be equipped to deal with that. I've seen several big punchers do that. Like, let's say Keith Thurman versus Jan Zavik or whatever his name is. He had been knocked out by Andre Berto before, and then when he got in there with a puncher like Keith Thurman, he's like, man, I ain't getting knocked out again, and he took Thurman the distance. So you got to know how to deal with that. You got to know how to deal with people who are just purely in survival mode. They're collecting a paycheck almost, and they don't give a fuck if they're winning the round. Because, I mean, clearly with Scott, he wasn't counterpunching. He wasn't throwing. They said the average amount of punches that he threw was under 13 a round for a heavyweight fight. So that's on the low side. So clearly there was no way he was going to win the fight doing that. You know what I mean? And you got to be able to put it together to deal with all styles. Like Andre Ward told me, you got to be equipped to deal with all the styles. Hard punchers, defensive guys who are boxer punchers, guys who are in survival mode. Because at the end of the day, nobody's trying to get world starred. Nobody's trying to get knocked out for millions to see. So, I mean, even if he's not winning the fight, some people are content just saving face. I think Victor Postol probably could have got knocked out by Crawford, but he was doing just enough to stay safe and look like he was trying. I was at that fight, you know what I mean? Close. He was doing enough to look like he was trying to really win the fight, but the way he was getting knocked down and losing the rounds, he wasn't going to win unless he went for broke. And that's where guys like James Kirkland get knocked out, because they're always willing to go out on their shield. I don't think Malik Scott was willing to do that. He was content just going the distance and playing spoiler. Omar Narvaez, another decorated Olympian that fought Nonito Donaire, another big puncher before Rigondeaux when Donaire was in his prime or whatever, and he just wasn't engaging enough to win the fight. He was clearly losing, but he made it a dud. And I think Donaire also fought that Japanese guy, Nishioka or whatever, and he did get a stoppage in that fight, but it was on the Brandon Rios Alvarado card, I believe, and he did get a stoppage in that fight, but Donaire had to keep trying because the guy was just too evasive and wasn't really committing and just shelling up. Josh Clottey versus Pacquiao, I can think of tons of fights like this. That wasn't Pacquiao's most sensational performance, but a lot of that has something to do with what he was up against. Clottey was just shelling up. He wasn't really creating any openings. So you got to have experience and just realize quick what you're in there with, and then start trying to counteract that. So overall, it wasn't the sharpest performance by Ortiz. I still think he's a problem in the division. It's just you got to start earlier or whatever against a guy who's in a survival mode like Malik Scott. That's my breakdown. Let me know what you guys think. Drop in the comment section. Make sure you share the video, like the video as always. Hate, comment, and subscribe. Till next video, it's Ego signing off.